Hello, welcome to Arizona State's beautiful lithography studio. If you're just stumbling upon this video through YouTube or something, you might be a little bit confused as to what's going on. I put these hand-drawn QR code posters throughout the school that you could scan. The posters were actually lithographs, and this video is going to show you how it was made. So just to kind of start things off, I just want to say there are a lot of ways to do this, a lot of ways to make a lithograph, and I'm by no means an expert, but this is all the steps that I took to make the lithograph that you are probably standing in front of right now. So we'll get started. First step is graining. So right here what I'm doing is just checking the levels of the stone, making sure it's flat, even. That's important for when you're going to be making a lithograph. Just important to wet the stone, put the grain on, spread it around. Now this tool here is called a levigator. I wanted to kind of show you a little slower the kind of motion that you use. It can be a little awkward to use. You got to get used to it. It's kind of heavy. So this is just kind of a run through of me doing the different grits. There's 4 grits that we have. We have an 80 and a 100. Those are mostly for removing the old images, and a 180 and a 220. Those are mostly used for polishing the stone, giving you a nice smooth surface to work on. So you just do it, and you will fan between each change of grit. Next, you can file the edges of your stone, beveling them. It kind of protects the equipment later on down the road, but it's an important thing to do. You don't have to do it every time, but every couple of times. I just kind of wanted to show you how that was done. Up next is prepping the paper. Paper is pretty important in printmaking. There's a lot of different kinds that you can get. A lot of them have different abilities or features or whatever you want to call it. It's not just straight paper, like you might think. So a normal size sheet of printmaking paper, of course they get bigger and smaller than this, but this is a 22 by 30 and I'm tearing it into quarters, 11 by 15. Now fine art prints are generally torn rather than cut, just something that kind of sets them apart. They get a nice rough edge that it's pretty cool, I think. Also, while I'm doing this, I'm setting up my registration marks. T and bar is what it's called. It's just pretty simple. It's a one-color print anyways. Also, I'm just going to make a couple of guide marks on the stone, help me later. Next is getting that art on the stone. So you want to make sure important things are backwards. Things that need to be read a certain way are backwards, so they print forwards. You can do a lot of different things to get the art on the stone. You can draw directly on the stone, you can sketch, you can work digitally and trace it, whatever you want. In this case, it was just easier for me to print a QR code off the internet and print a 8.5 by 11 sheets and tape them together to make the size that I need. This is what I'm going to use for transferring. It's a red iron oxide piece of paper. It's just newsprint with the red iron oxide spread on it. It's a transfer paper that won't actually affect the printing. It'll come off during the etching process. It doesn't print or anything like that, so it's real nice to use. And here we go. We just outline it, trace like you would anything else. You're gonna want to use a pretty hard pencil, just because you got to kind of press a little firmly. I guess it depends on how much red iron oxide is on your transfer sheet, but this is like a 4H, something like that, and works pretty good. I have no issues with it. And there you go. That's what it looks like, transferred with the transfer paper. Next is drawing on the stone itself. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different materials you can use. I like to use these litho crayons. I like the texture that they give. You can kind of see that I had a little bit already underway before starting recording. But the crayons, they come in different hardnesses like pencils. So this is a pretty soft one to make some darker marks, just because I wanted to make sure the QR code worked properly. Now the etching, this is done twice, and I only included in the video once, just for time purposes. But what I'm doing here is I put some rosin and talc on the stone some gum arabic and kind of worked it into the stone for a few minutes. And then using a mixture of gum arabic and nitric acid, I work that in for a few minutes as well each time, kind of building it. Lithography uses a lot of pressure on their presses to make sure the image transfers from the stone to the paper. And this is just sort of a quick idea of how you do it. It's pretty simple. Not a lot of thought goes into it, but it is important. Up next, we're going to do a law, which just stands for lithotine, asphaltum, and water. This is another thing that's done twice, but I only included it once. The only difference between the first and the second is that you would use the color of ink that you are going to actually print with in the second, whereas in the first you're just going to use black. It's important that you do this in the proper order, or else you're going to ruin the whole thing. Up next, you're ready to print. So I've got the ink rolled out. You know, you got to always keep your stone wet. A couple of passes on the stone, and I built up the ink through proofing to where I only needed to ink it twice, but when you're proofing, you'll probably need to do a couple more passes just to build up that ink. It's important not to over ink, something I've done when I was beginning and even still a couple times now. Just keep an eye on it. Once you've got it built up, you know, just it's kind of a by feel thing, and you'll get it. So here we'll have our first print, and then you can kind of just see the whole process. This is me running through the addition. Counting that first one, I made 12. You can see after every couple, I put a little more ink down on the slab there in the corner, and just so I can keep a consistent look. That's the most important thing in printmaking is consistency through the whole edition. Alright, now here's the final print. Pretty simple overall. This was experimental for me. Just had to make sure that QR code worked, but you can kind of see the crayon texture in there. It's really nice. Looks great for more detailed drawings, I think. Up next, I wanted to give you a couple of examples of my own work. Here is the most recent litho that I've finished. I just wanted to show it because I think it gives you a pretty good idea of the value changes that you can get. You can draw with the litho crayon like it is a pencil, do shading and different things like that, something that's unique to lithography. You can also add as many colors as you want. Just keep in mind the more colors you add, it's a separate drawing for each color. So that can get kind of tedious and time consuming, but I think the end results are pretty great. The drawing that's over the top of this whole one, the blue kind of face, is something that my 4-year-old son drew. Something I kind of started adding into my pieces, so that was a different process. An aluminum plate lithograph. The principles are still all the same, but rather than a stone, it's a aluminum plate. So the next one that I wanted to show is a work in progress, but I think this gives maybe a little bit better of an example of the value changes that you can get in the litho process. Draw as comfortably as you will with a pencil. Etch it right. That's pretty hard sometimes, but I think as you do it more and more, you'll get it down better. I've definitely gotten better since starting, but of course I'm by no means an expert at this point. It's a difficult process. Once you kind of get the hang of it, you know, the work that you can make, I think, is some of the most beautiful work out there. Thanks again for watching, and go print.